I hope you all are enjoying today's session. As a passionate marketer myself, I am loving the way the topics are flowing today. We started the day understanding the new role of integrated marketing. Once that was achieved, we looked at the impact of sales and ROI of marketing and non-marketing activities. And we just concluded a session on building personalization at scale. We now move on to the next crucial step in building that digital dominance, which is owning your first-party data. Now, we've all heard this for years. The cookie is crumbling, right? And well, it was supposed to stop crumbling this year, but the delayed timeline from Google has given CMOs some more time to revisit their first-party data approach. Let me introduce the next session on the crumbling cookie, and let me invite the editorial director of MarTech Vibe, Ravi Raman. A media industry professional with over 2 decades of content strategy, brand marketing, and team leadership experience, he has launched Middle East Edition's most iconic media brands like Wired and Bloomberg Businessweek. In addition, he has also played a pivotal role in leadership positions at Khaleej Times, T, the New York Style Magazine, MSN, India Today, and The Telegraph. He's a TEDx speaker and has been part of several industry forums as a speaker, panel member, and presenter. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. And as you mentioned, Google has delayed its move to block third-party cookies by another year, citing the need to move at a responsible pace, which I read as marketers aren't ready. And there are talks about alternatives like FLOC or United ID, even contextual targeting. But the delay gives you, the marketers, more time to get ready. So what should you be doing first? What should be your first-party data strategy? What should be your zero-party data strategy? Let's find out from this amazing panel that we have today. We have Nthabiseng, I hope I've got the pronunciation right, apologies if I'm not, who's Nedbank's executive head for group marketing. We have Jean, digital media manager from Unilever Africa. We have Audrey, who heads the digital marketing at Absa. And finally, we have Beth, who handles enterprise accounts at Salesforce. Audrey, I want to start with you, asking what are the key challenges that marketers are facing and will face in this shift towards a cookieless world?
Hi, Ravi. Yes, thanks for that great question. I think from our perspective, because I work at Absa, there are a number of challenges for marketers, but I've actually put them into 4 dimensions. One is how we handle and manage data. And by that, I mean there's a renewed focus on data compliance, risk, data governance, especially now with POP year coming to play in July. And then we're seeing, in terms of data management, is how data flows from organizations, so the inflow and outflow of data, ensuring that there are rigorous processes to manage and govern that. So that's critical for us. The second area, which I think a lot of marketers are focused on, is the media side of it. It's targeting, remarketing, attribution, frequency capping. All of that is going to play a critical role in how we measure performance of campaigns. So already I've seen from yesterday, having read a couple of updates, because there's an overflow of information and people coming up with new solutions. Already there are like 7 providers with alternate solutions to third-party cookies. So we're going to see evolving, the environment changing over time. And then finally, I think we need to really look into our measurement value chain and understanding the customer journey, because what I'm seeing is that there is a control that's been moved from external parties and partners into organizations, where marketers need to now take control and start defining what is their first-party data strategy, what is this roadmap, and what are the different phases they need to implement to get this right.
That's absolutely right. Beth, I want to get your thoughts on this, but also quickly tell us that zero-party data obviously is going to become critical. So what is going to be the best strategy to acquire it?
Okay, so I think we need to set the scene first as to what zero-party data is. So it was a term coined by Forrester, and it essentially says that zero-party data is data that a customer gives a brand intentionally and proactively. There's 2 really important points there. Okay, and it can span anything from, preference centers, subscription centers, purchase intentions, personal or demographic context, all the way through to telling a brand, how to recognize them. So what is my personal identifier? How do I want you to know who I am? So that's what zero-party data is, a very explicit type of first-party data. Now, the question you asked is, how should brands acquire it? Right? What's the best method or strategy? And I would counter that question slightly by saying that the acquisition or the collection of this zero-party data is only one tenet of using it successfully. You need to collect it. You then need to connect it with the other zero-party data systems or sources that you're using. And then you need to activate it. And this isn't a, step 1, step 2, step 3 process. We look at it as a kind of flywheel where it's always on. So the data that you are acquiring or collecting, you are then using in as real-time a capacity as possible to stitch together with your other customer sources, and then you activate it wherever your customer is to provide the best experience for them. Whether that experience be an offer or, a promotion or, the opportunity to have a call with somebody if you're experiencing a problem. Because, marketing is about the accumulation of each of these moments and getting that data from your customers. You only build trust when you use it in the right way.
That's absolutely right and very well said. Jean, I want to bring you at this stage. We talked about stitching a persona and really understanding your customers. So tell us, which tools do you think will be important to capture key consumer insights?
Thanks for that, Ravi. And yeah, look, I think the session before this on the hyper-personalization kind of alluded to a lot of what's possible. But before getting into the tools, I think the biggest piece for most brands is also to understand where they are in their data maturity strategy. If you look at brands just starting out, Google has just given them a reprise by giving that extension, right? So if you weren't in the game or building your DMPs or your attributions based on cookies, you have to get there really quickly. But if you start looking at like without the cookie scenario and even the category which I'm in, I come from an FMCG environment, having spent time with telco and entertainment. So first-party data, access to first-party data is quite critical for me because I don't have that, unlike some of the other industries. So for me, it comes down to data partnerships and then the tools that facilitate that. When you start looking at server-to-server or clean rooms and providers that kind of facilitate that, like you have a few on the sponsorship track for the actual conference, but when we start looking at conversion API and server-to-server partnerships, those are going to be quite critical going forward as the role of the walled gardens become quite prominent. But we also have to log the point that our brand's just starting out, and tools that already exist that's very cookie-based, like DMPs, would come in. But when you go down the line, understanding your customer journey and going through that, whether it's analytics tools, Google 360, CRM tools. I mean, Beth's team probably has a good scenario there. But unified ID, Audrey mentioned it, all of these are coming in, whether it's the open internet sources you're looking for. But for me, a critical one is going to be clean rooms and server-to-server integrations.
All right. So at this stage, Nthabiseng, I want to bring you in. Obviously, zero party or even first party, the foundation of that would be consent. Right. So what are your views on a consent management strategy? What have you done to get that?
I think, Jean, Ravi, more than ever, I think consent management is almost the front line of your risk exposure and your reputation just as a transparent and trusted business. So consent management strategies absolutely have had to evolve, even for us, to become much more comprehensive, yet still easier for customers to understand and be compliant with the necessary laws and regulations locally and internationally in order for brands and businesses to be able to succeed in terms of creating an orientation of, yes, privacy first, but also customer centricity at the heart of actual consent management strategies. And increasingly, the same as us, we've seen a move towards more holistically captured consent across touch points, brands, channels, organizations being able to evaluate how their digital footprint fits into existing and also future regulatory environments. Consent tools being integrated into the digital experience much more often to be able to support those consent management strategies, and a much more iterative analysis of the impact of consent management programs overall. And I think just holistically, to round it off, focusing on consent, whether it be general consent, legitimate interest, and also preferences of customers, truly builds trust. And to Beth's earlier point around trust, it truly is the foundation for today's meaningful customers' relationship. And ultimately, what you want is to be able to use your consent management strategy to be able to enable that as your North Star as a business overall.
Very true. And as publishers, we've seen that if you provide value to your customers, they start trusting you and they start trusting you with their data. But Beth, I want to ask you one question. Privacy and trust obviously are two critical factors. And obviously all the CMOs are looking at these two aspects. How can organizations address this better?
Okay. So the big change, right, that's coming for consumers, for us as consumers in our favor, is that currently the internet is set up whereby the end customer has to manage their own consent. Okay. With a brand, I manage whether I will accept or reject cookies. I give you my subscription preferences. Sometimes I'm asked for my, thematic preferences, channel frequency. I don't see that a lot, but, the really good brands are doing that. The big change that's coming in relation to cookies, right, and how we're going to engage people on the web is that it's moving to the browsers providing the consent. So you are not going to know anymore that this is Beth on your website, doing X, Y, and Z. Well, the brand will know it. But, in order to sell that data, you won't be able to sell Beth. You'll be able to sell people who have similar interests to Beth, right? Same demographic,
Are you talking about unified ID? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I'm saying that's a big change that's happening, right, for the consumer. It's moving. It's less my responsibility to manage all of the consent and privacy and regulation. However, from a brand's perspective, there's a huge opportunity here, I think, for brands to win using regulation and privacy and trust, using that structure to drive better experiences and better sales really with their customers. If you can, and I think, we've all touched on it here, but as a brand, right, if you are able to build trust, whether that be explicitly, speaking about your trust methodology and, making sure that all of your customers' data is collected in an ethical way, used in an ethical way, shared in an ethical way, that's important. But actually winning through trust is much more nuanced and subtle. It's about, taking those signals in. So we were talking about acquiring data, getting those signals, and then really using them to provide the best experience. Okay.
Got it. I want to bring in Audrey. Audrey, what are your thoughts on this? And since we don't have too much of time, this has to be a rapid fire kind of an answer. So what are your next steps on acquiring zero-party, first-party data? What would be the next big step that you would take?
I think, Ravi, currently what was important for us to do is to do a diagnostic or an audit of what is currently at play. Because as a bank and a large corporate, we have legacy systems, we have new tech, and then we needed extra tech on top of that. So also understanding that when you start to speak about tech, you're not only talking about MarTech, but you're also talking about ad tech. One of the key gaps, and I think that could be an opportunity, for me, the key gaps is the skill sets and the competencies required to get this work done. Because you can put the best framework, you can have the best tech, but if you need the right people to get the work done. And what we will see in the near future in terms of marketing is a lot of this expertise and technical skill set will be outsourced by external partners. So we do need help as marketers. And if you look at it, a lot of marketers are still very much in the traditional space. So now bringing in the tech conversation, asking them to have the technical capability and understanding of how you connect the dots and how you connect the data is going to be a challenge going forward. So I really think that there's a lot of work to be done. It's very complex. There's no easy, straightforward answer to what you're asking.
True, very true. I agree. But let's face it, all the marketers had years to prepare. Jean, what has been your experience? What is going to be your next step?
Yeah, Ravi, I think what we've started looking at, obviously, making reality our friend, right? We're gonna have to have a dual strategy at some point. So making hay while the sun shines with the cookie and attributions we have today. At the same time, preparing for the future. And again, as I mentioned earlier, data partnerships is going to be critical to that. An additional piece to that is having a look at more our consumer journey and our relationship with our customer. A lot has been said around the data-driven side around the crumbling cookie. What we're starting to look at is more the neuromarketing or brain-driven approach. And here we're looking at some of the diversity inclusion aspects, the hyper-personalization we touched on earlier. But if you look at products like universal inclusion from companies like Reset Digital, you start going into a different territory away from traditional segmentation and current data fields. And you're actually speaking to the individual at scale. So that's something that we're preparing ourselves for, especially going back to the point around the lack of first-party data is a major constraint for consumer goods. But we see it as a good constraint to innovate around. We've launched loyalty products and other initiatives. So we're building that one-to-one relationship with customer, not just on a data perspective, but how do we go deeper in that relationship?
So would you say that contextual targeting might become more important for you in the time being, till the time you don't acquire the zero-party and first-party data?
No, 100%. And that's why I was talking about more the brain-driven side. Like we've got a good data field to start working from. Yes, it's not very deep and it's not very wide, but it's a starting point. And actually building around that is the current focus.
Nthabiseng, I want to understand from you, how have you created a robust architecture to make the most of your first-party data?
Unmute. I think by just starting to focus on more AI-driven marketing automation, real-time analytics, and just UX optimization with as best-in-class customer data experience platforms as we can get. And those are platforms that can start to help us unify and organize fragmented data that is dispersed across our organization in such a way that other systems within the marketing stack can start to ingest, understand, and use that data to be able to provide the experiences that customers are really longing for. Because ultimately, at the heart of it for us, it starts with understanding that customers these days have very high expectations versus before in terms of how they exchange their loyalty for personalized experiences. And to be able to win them over, we've had to invest in the right tools, in the underlying architecture to be able to provide those experiences in terms of reliable data, reliable real-time predictive data, and the ability to be able to effectively utilize that predictive data to deliver those experiences they're longing for.
That's great. Beth, I want to just touch upon one point that even Jean mentioned, which was about data exchanges and their potential. What are your views on that?
I completely agree with Jean, right? I think that is, it's the way forward. It's been around for a long time. It's not a new concept. It was just that third party was so prolific and the cookie was so strong that the second party ecosystem never really got the chance to take off, And again, maybe just an example. So if listeners don't know what a data exchange is, and like Jean, let's use one of your products, right? So, I need to buy a mascara. I usually buy through maybe Clicks or I buy through Woolies. You have my data as a customer of your product, and Clicks or Woolies have my data as, somebody who shops through their channels. The ability to share these segments and to share these customers, in an overlapping way that provides value for me and provides value for both of the brands. I think to bring it back to one of your previous questions, they're only going to be successful if the walled garden or the exchange is as transparent and open about not just the match rates, but also the conversion and the ROI. And if they are, they will be the cream of the crop, right? They will be the exchanges that brands want to go onto. Because if you can tie that conversion API, i.e., an ad shown at the cart, goes into cart, sale is made, that is huge and immediate ROI for any brand.
That's wonderful. And to a certain extent, I think this gives a lot of control back to publishers because they have access to first-party data purely because of the content that they produce. Just final thoughts from all of you in terms of, again, I'm asking this question again, what is going to be one single strongest next step from you, which you can give advice to others? The CMOs listening, we have about 600 plus delegates listening. What should they do next Monday?
Okay, for me, consolidate your 8 pillars of first-party data. Right, so look up the 8 pillars. We've already mentioned loyalty, pause, transactions, touch points. Think about your customer communities, whether they be social or portal. You might not have all 8, but as a brand, you probably have minimum 3. Leverage those channels, leverage that technology that you currently have, start driving really strong experiences from them so that you can build up this data repository. And second thing, put in a data COE, custom, center of excellence, and start planning and preparing for the future.
Makes sense. Audrey?
Yeah, I would say what I said before, Ravi, is to start doing a diagnostic and audit in terms of where you are now, and then build that roadmap for the future. It may not be at one go. I think it's a very phased approach. And I agree with Jean, it's hybrid. No one's going to get it right overnight. And then secondly, invest in the right resources and capabilities to drive your agenda. Understood.
Jean, what about you?
Other than like the tools, because we spoke to that at length, it's about the people. We talk about the data modeling, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a scarce skill in terms of the data scientist, right? And that's something that and Aubrey touched on it, saying that we're going to have to outsource that. Because let's face it, we don't have those skill sets in most organizations today. It's not a traditional requirement. It's not a need we used to have. And that's going to be the critical step in terms of who's going to manage that data strategy and how you're going to output it. So for me, it's a people step. Yes, a diagnostic. Yes, tools. But at the end of the day, who's going to manage it? Beth touched on center of excellence, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. You're going to have either hub and spoke model and make sure you readjust some of your organizational constraints. Because let's face it, like a lot of what we need is going to need, it's transformational. It's not a pillar that exists in most organizations today.
I completely agree that what we're going to go through in the next 2 years is going to be transformational. Parting thoughts, last comments from Nthabiseng, and then we can close up.
I think for me, it's just focusing on increased alignment across the organization. So continue to have marketing people who tie the MarTech agenda to real ROI in the business, that they continue to speak business. They make sure that they're tying what we're doing to customer acquisition, to lifetime value, and to marketing contributed and influence revenue, so that the rest of the business, it's easier for them to really understand the purpose of what we're doing, why we're trying to win, what we need to do to really be good at what we need to deliver, and why we need the kind of resource architecture that's required to make us good at reaching these customers, growing our brand value overall.
Truly rightly said. And thank you so much for this insightful discussion. Guys, we know the cookie is going to crumble very soon. So let's get ready. Sanjay has been kind enough to give us a few extra minutes. So that's a wrap.